The year was 2847, and humans have been part of the Galactic Concord for almost 300 years. In all that time, they had built a very strange reputation among the stars. They were not known as warriors. They were not known as conquerors. Instead, the galaxy knew humans as healers, helpers, and bridge-builders. Commander Lisa Howard stood on the observation deck of her starship, the Endurance. Below her, the orange and gold surface of the Valari homeworld glowed softly in the light of its twin suns. A crew of 200 men and women had spent the last 8 months on this world, helping the Valari people rebuild after a terrible earthquake had destroyed 3 of their largest cities. Before that mission, the Endurance had carried medical supplies to the Kreth colonies on the far side of the galaxy. Before that, Lisa and her crew had helped negotiate a trade agreement between 2 species who had been fighting for over 100 years. This was what humans did now. They helped. They healed. They built things instead of destroying them. Ambassador Threlvok stood beside Lisa on the observation deck. He was tall and thin, with 4 eyes that blinked one after another, and his body was covered in a hard shell like an insect. The Galactic Concord had assigned him to watch the humans and report on their activities. "Your species confuses me," Threlvok said. His voice was clicking and scratchy, like stones rubbing together. "I have studied your military records. Your weapons can crack moons in half. Your soldiers are strong, adaptable, and creative in ways that frighten our war planners. Yet, you choose to do this." He waved one of his 4 arms at the planet below. "You rebuild homes for strangers." "Why?" Lisa smiled at him. It was a soft, patient smile. "We learned something a long time ago, Ambassador. Destruction is easy. Anyone can break things. But building something that lasts? Something that matters? That is the hard part. That is what takes real strength." Threlvok's antennae twitched. He did not fully understand, but he accepted her answer. Across the galaxy, humanity had become known as the gentle giants of the Concord. When disaster struck any world, human ships were often the first to arrive with food, medicine, and helping hands. When refugees fled from war or famine, human colonies opened their doors and made room. When young aliens wanted to learn about science, art, or medicine, human universities welcomed them without question. When conflicts arose between species, humans were always the first to suggest talking instead of fighting. Their diplomats were patient and kind. Their doctors treated anyone who needed help, regardless of species. Their engineers built hospitals and schools on worlds they would never see again. Dr. Kevin Palmer walked onto the observation deck to join them. He was the chief medical officer of the Endurance, a quiet man in his 50s with gentle hands and tired eyes. He had spent his entire career learning how to heal aliens whose bodies worked in ways most humans could not even imagine. "Good news," Kevin said. "The Valari Council has approved our departure. They want to throw us a farewell celebration tomorrow night." Lisa laughed softly. "Another feast where we cannot properly digest the food." "Probably," Kevin agreed with a small smile. "But we will smile and eat it anyway, because it makes them happy." Threlvok watched this exchange with growing confusion. "This is precisely what I do not understand about your species. You endure discomfort for the sake of others' feelings. You accept insults with grace. Last month, the Drenari delegation openly mocked humans for your primitive origins. They called you mudcrawlers and ape children. Your ambassador simply laughed with them instead of demanding an apology." Lisa's expression changed for just a moment. Something harder and colder flickered behind her eyes, like lightning glimpsed through clouds. But it passed quickly, and her face returned to its usual warmth. "We choose peace, Ambassador," she said quietly. "We choose it actively, every single day." because we know what we are capable of when we do not make that choice. Threlvok leaned forward with interest. And what is that, Commander? What are humans capable of? Lisa turned back to the viewport. Her reflection floated ghost-like against the stars, transparent and pale. Pray you never find out. The next evening, the farewell feast took place in the great hall of the Valari capital. Thousands of the tall, graceful aliens gathered to thank the human crew for their help. They served dishes made from plants and animals that human stomachs were not designed to handle. The flavors were strange and sometimes unpleasant. Several crew members would spend the next day feeling sick, but every single human smiled and ate and thanked their hosts. They danced to music that hurt their ears. They drank beverages that tasted like medicine. They did this because they knew it mattered to the Valari, and making others feel valued was more important than their own comfort. Lisa stood at the edge of the celebration, watching her crew. She felt proud of them. These were good people, kind people, the sort of people humanity had worked hard to become. An old Valari approached her. His scales were gray with age, and he walked slowly with the help of a cane. "Commander Howard," he said, "I am Elder Voss. I was young when the first human ships came to our world, over 200 years ago. I have watched your species for a long time. It is an honor to meet you, Elder." The old alien studied her with wise, patient eyes. "Other species think humans are weak because you are kind. They are fools. I have seen kindness that requires more strength than any weapon. I have watched your people choose mercy when anger would be easier. This is not weakness. This is power held in check." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. "You understand this, Elder. I understand enough." He placed one wrinkled hand on her arm. "I also understand that the power you hold in check is vast and terrible. I hope the galaxy never gives you a reason to release it. But I fear that day may come." "Why do you say that?" Elder Voss looked out at the celebration, at humans and Valari laughing together, sharing food and stories. "Because there are species out there who see kindness only as opportunity. They see patience only as weakness. And they will push and push until they discover the truth that I already know." "What truth is that?" The old alien met her eyes. "That the gentlest hearts often hide the sharpest claws. And that those who choose peace most carefully are often the most dangerous when that choice is taken from them." Lisa said nothing. There was nothing to say. The elder was right, and they both knew it. Somewhere out in the darkness between stars, forces were moving that would soon prove his words true. But for now, on this night, there was only music and laughter and the warmth of friendship between species. Lisa let herself enjoy it. These peaceful moments were precious, that they would not last forever. 6 months after the Endurance left the Valari homeworld, the galaxy changed forever. The Cathari Dominion had always existed at the edges of Concord space. They were a race of reptilian warriors, tall and powerful, with scales like armor and teeth like knives. Their entire culture was built around conquest and domination. They believed that the strong should rule and the weak should serve. They saw diplomacy as cowardice and mercy as foolishness. For centuries, the Cathari had watched humanity from a distance. They had seen the human relief ships rushing to disaster zones. They had watched human diplomats patiently negotiating peace treaties. They had observed human doctors healing the sick and wounded of other species without asking for anything in return. And they had grown to despise what they saw. High Commander Vexter stood before his war council on the Cathari throne world. He was massive, even by his species standards, with scales as black as night and eyes that burned like hot coals. Scars from 100 battles covered his body. He had never lost a fight, and he did not intend to start now. "The humans are soft," he declared, his voice echoing through the stone chamber. "They waste their strength on mercy. Their colonies are rich and their technology is advanced, yet they have no real military. no warrior class. They are sheep waiting to be slaughtered. One of his advisors spoke up nervously. "Aye, Commander, the humans have warned us many times not to threaten them. They say we would not like them when they are angry." Vexter laughed. It was a horrible sound, like rocks grinding together. Warnings? Empty threats from a species that sends doctors instead of soldiers. They warn everyone. They warn the wind and the rain. Their warnings mean nothing. The council voted unanimously for war. The invasion began without any formal announcement. The Cathari did not believe in such things. They believed in striking fast and hard, crushing their enemies before they could react. Their target was a human colony called New Montana. It was a peaceful agricultural world on the edge of human space. The population was 2.3 million people, mostly farmers and their families. There were no military bases on New Montana. There were no weapons factories. There were only farms stretching across golden plains, small towns where children played in the streets, and ordinary people living ordinary lives. The Cathari fleet appeared in the sky at dawn. 12 massive dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, 200 support ships. The people of New Montana looked up and saw their sky filled with death. Governor Margaret Cole received the transmission in her small office. She was 63 years old, a former schoolteacher who had gone into politics because she wanted to make her community better. She had never imagined anything like this. Vexter's face appeared on her screen. "Human settlement, you will surrender immediately. Your people will serve the Dominion. Your resources will fuel our expansion. If you resist, we will show you the cost of defiance." Margaret's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "This is Governor Cole. All citizens, please remain calm. Go to the emergency shelters. Do not resist. I repeat, do not resist." She knew there was no hope of fighting back. New Montana had a small security force of about 200 officers. They were trained to handle bar fights and traffic accidents, not alien invasions. The colony's only ships were slow cargo freighters that could not outrun a Cathari fighter. Margaret switched to the Cathari frequency. "High Commander, we surrender. Completely and without conditions. Please, there are children here. Families. We only ask for mercy." Vexter smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Mercy is for the weak. Your surrender is accepted." Then, the bombardment began anyway. The Cathari did not want to destroy the colony. That would waste valuable resources. But they wanted to demonstrate their power. They wanted to break the spirit of the humans before they even landed. Kinetic strikes fell on the 3 largest cities. The weapons hit hospitals, schools, and community centers. Buildings that had stood for generations crumbled to dust in seconds. People who had been eating breakfast with their families were dead before they knew what was happening. In the first hour, 40,000 people died. When the Cathari troops finally landed, they found survivors huddled in shelters, covered in dust and tears. Margaret Cole stood at the spaceport to meet them. Her face was covered in soot, and blood from a head wound had dried on her forehead. But she stood straight and met their eyes. "We surrendered," she said quietly. "Why did you attack us?" Vexter stepped off his shuttle and towered over her. "Because I wanted to." His soldiers dragged a young man forward. His name was Ben Marson. He was 19 years old, a farmer's son. When he had seen Cathari soldiers laughing as they walked past the bodies of dead children, something inside him had snapped. He had thrown a rock at one of them. That was all. "Just a rock." "This one resisted," Vexter said. Margaret's voice cracked. "Please, he's just a boy." He was scared. He did not hurt anyone. He was defiant. Defiance must be punished. Vexter drew his plasma blade himself. The weapon hummed with deadly energy. "No," Margaret screamed, "Please, no." The execution was broadcast to the entire colony. Every survivor was forced to watch as Ben Morrison died. His mother's screams echoed through the shelters. That night, as Cathari soldiers celebrated their easy victory, a single human cargo ship slipped away from New Montana. The pilot, a man named Jack Mason, had hidden his ship in an asteroid field and waited for the right moment. With him were his teenage daughter Sophie and an elderly engineer named Carol Bennett. Carol had lost her husband, her children, and her grandchildren in the bombardment. They had one mission. They had to reach Earth. They had to tell humanity what had happened. The journey took 3 weeks. The little cargo ship was not built for speed, and Jack had to push its engines beyond their limits. Half the ship's systems burned out along the way. They ran out of fresh food after the first week and survived on emergency rations that tasted like cardboard, but they made it. When Jack finally brought the ship into Earth's orbital space, he sent a single message ahead. "This is Jack Mason from New Montana Colony. The Cathari have attacked us. 40,000 dead. They executed a boy for throwing a rock. We surrendered, and they attacked us anyway." His voice broke. "Please, you have to do something. They are still there. There are still people alive. Please help them." The message reached Earth and spread like fire across the planet. Humanity had been patient for 300 years. They had chosen peace over and over again. They had absorbed insults and mockery with grace. They had given everything they had to help others. But this was different. This was their people. Their children. Murdered for no reason by an enemy who had laughed while doing it. Deep inside the human soul, something ancient began to wake up. Something that had been sleeping for centuries. Something that the galaxy had forgotten existed. Something terrible. The cargo ship carrying Jack Mason, his daughter Sophie, and old Carol Bennett limped into Earth's defense zone, looking like it might fall apart at any moment. Smoke poured from its damaged engines. Half its hull was scorched from pushing through asteroid fields at unsafe speeds. Emergency lights blinked red across every system, but the ship had made it. And the message it carried would change everything. Earth's military had grown small and quiet over 3 centuries of peace. The unified defense force existed mostly for show. Their ships were old designs, kept running more for parades than for actual fighting. Their weapons were made for pushing asteroids away from populated worlds, not for war. Most people had forgotten that Earth even had a military. That began to change within hours of the survivors' arrival. Secretary General Ruth Simmons called an emergency meeting of the Global Council. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She had spent her whole life working in humanitarian causes, helping refugees and disaster victims across the galaxy. She had never expected to lead humanity into war. The council chamber was silent as the footage from New Montana played on the large screen. The members watched cities burn. They watched civilians running through streets filled with fire and smoke. They watched the execution of Ben Morrison, a 19-year-old boy whose only crime was fear. When the footage ended, no one spoke for a long time. Then Admiral Gregory Hayes stood up slowly from his chair. He was 82 years old, with white hair and a face lined with age. He had been given command of Earth's defense forces because everyone thought it was a ceremonial position. He spent most of his time studying history and organizing parade schedules. No one expected him to actually fight anything. "May I speak?" he asked. Ruth nodded. "Go ahead, Admiral." Hayes walked to the front of the chamber. His steps were slow, his joints stiff with age, but his voice was clear and strong. "I have spent my entire life studying human history," he said. "The wars we fought against each other, the terrible things we did. 2 world wars that killed hundreds of millions. nuclear weapons that could have destroyed our entire planet. We look back on those times with shame now. And we should. He paused and looked around the room. But I also remember something else about those times. When our homes were threatened, when our families were murdered, when everything we loved was in danger, we did not give up. We did not surrender. We fought with everything we had. We invented new weapons and new strategies. We pushed ourselves beyond any limit anyone thought possible. And we won. The chamber remained completely still. Every eye was fixed on the old admiral. The galaxy knows us as healers now, helpers, the species that sends doctors instead of soldiers. And we are those things. We worked hard to become those things. But we did not forget what we were before. The knowledge is still here. He tapped his head. The ability is still here. It has been sleeping for 300 years. Waiting. His voice grew harder. The Kethari have woken it up. Within hours of that speech, everything changed. Factories that had been building farming equipment suddenly switched to making weapons. Scientists who had spent their careers developing medicine and clean energy turned their brilliant minds to darker purposes. Millions of people who had never held a weapon in their lives reported to training centers, ready to learn. Dr. Sandra Wells was one of the greatest physicists alive. She had won every major scientific prize for her work on clean fusion energy. Her reactors powered entire planets without pollution or waste. She had dreamed of a future where energy was free and unlimited for everyone. Now she stood in her laboratory, watching technicians take apart her life's work. "You know what they are building, don't you?" her young assistant asked. Sandra nodded slowly. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set with determination. "When I designed this reactor, I built in a safety system, a way to shut it down if the containment fields ever failed. I never imagined anyone would want to do the opposite." "The opposite?" "Remove the safety systems. Let the reaction grow without limit." Sandra's voice was quiet. "My fusion reactor could power a city for 100 years. Without the safety systems, it could destroy that city in a single second." Across the planet, similar transformations were happening. Passenger ships were being converted into troop carriers. Communication satellites were being fitted with targeting systems. Training programs that had not been used in centuries were being pulled from archives and updated. But the most important change was happening inside the people themselves. For 300 years, humans had worked to become better, kinder, more peaceful. They had taught their children that violence was wrong and that problems should be solved with words, not weapons. They had built a civilization based on helping others instead of hurting them. Now, something older was waking up inside them. Something that remembered a time before peace. A time when humans had been the most dangerous predators on their planet. Not because they were the biggest or the strongest, but because they simply refused to give up. Ever. No matter what. This ancient part of humanity looked at the footage from New Montana and felt something it had not felt in centuries. Rage. Not hot. Wild anger that burns itself out quickly. This was cold, patient, controlled. It was the kind of anger that plans and waits and never forgets. Ruth Simmons spoke to the entire planet 3 days after the council meeting. Her image appeared on every screen, in every home, on every world where humans lived. "The Kethari believe we are weak," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "They attacked our people without warning. They murdered civilians who had surrendered. They executed a child for throwing a rock. And they laughed while they did it." She paused. "They were wrong about us. For 300 years, we have chosen peace. We have healed the sick and fed the hungry and helped anyone who needed us. We did this because we believed it was right. We did it because we knew what we were capable of when we did not choose peace." Her eyes seemed to look directly at every person watching. The Cathari took that choice away from us. They murdered our children and expected us to accept it. They expected us to stay gentle and kind and harmless. They are about to learn why humanity always warned them. Do not make us mad. We are coming for them. Not with hatred. Not with cruelty. We will not become the monsters they are. But we will stop them. We will rescue our people. And we will make certain that no one in this galaxy ever believes they can attack humans without consequences. May God forgive us for what we are about to do. The message ended, but its effects were just beginning. Across human space, people felt something shift inside themselves. The gentle giants of the galaxy were putting away their medical bags and picking up weapons. The Cathari had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about power. They were about to learn one instead. 3 months after the fall of New Montana, a small human ship appeared at the edge of Cathari space. It was just a modified cargo freighter, old and unarmed, with a crew of only 5 people. It should not have been frightening at all, but the message it carried was terrifying. Admiral Gregory Hayes appeared on every Cathari screen, on every frequency, in every language they spoke. His face was calm. His voice was steady. But his eyes were cold in a way that made even hardened warriors feel uneasy. To the Cathari Dominion, he said, to High Commander Vexter, to every soldier, officer, and citizen of your empire, this is a message from humanity. He let the silence stretch for a moment. 3 months ago, you attacked our colony. You killed 43,000 civilians who had already surrendered. You executed a young man whose only crime was being afraid. You broadcast his death to show us how helpless we were. We received your message. Now receive ours. His voice did not rise, did not show anger. That made it worse. For 300 years, we chose peace. We healed your sick. We taught your young. We gave our time and our resources to a galaxy that often mocked us for being soft. We did this because we knew what we were capable of when we did not choose peace. We hoped we would never have to show you. You proved us wrong. In the coming days, you will watch your fleets burn. Your fortress worlds will fall. Your leaders will face justice for what they have done. This is not revenge. Revenge would be doing to your people what you did to ours. We will not do that. Your civilians will be safe. But your military? Your government? Everyone who ordered or carried out the attack on New Montana. You will answer for what you have done. The message ended. High Commander Vexter watched it in his throne room and laughed out loud. Threats? From the species that sends doctors instead of soldiers? He waved a clawed hand dismissively. Ignore them. They are pretending to be brave. They have no real military. They cannot hurt us. He was still laughing when the first human warships arrived. They came out of hyperspace by the thousands. These were not old cargo ships or converted passenger vessels. These were weapons of war, built in the last 3 months with desperate speed and terrible purpose. Their designs were new but drew on old knowledge. Lessons learned from centuries of humans fighting each other, the most dangerous and creative enemy they had ever faced. The human fleet was not pretty. It was not elegant. It was built for one purpose only, and that purpose was destruction. At the front of the fleet flew the carrier, Declaration of Purpose. Its commander was Captain Nick Torres, a man who had spent 20 years delivering medical supplies to distant worlds. He had never fired a weapon in anger until 3 months ago. He had lost his sister on New Montana. She had been a nurse, treating wounded Cathari civilians when a soldier shot her for sport. All ships, Nick said quietly into his communicator. Weapons free. The first battle lasted 17 minutes. The Cathari border station was protected by 30 warships, the largest force stationed at any single point in the Dominion. They were veterans of dozens of conquests, crews who had never tasted defeat. The human fleet destroyed them all, without losing a single ship. Vextha received the report with disbelief. Impossible. How is this possible? They had no military 3 months ago. His advisors had no answers. They only had fear. The human advance continued. One fortress after another fell. The Cathari fought back with everything they had, every weapon, every strategy, every trick they knew. It was not enough. Human tactics were strange and unpredictable. They attacked from unexpected angles. They used their ships in ways no one had ever seen before. They seemed to know what the Cathari would do before the Cathari did it. The truth was simpler than any alien could understand. Humans had spent thousands of years fighting themselves. They had invented weapons and then invented defenses against those weapons, and then invented new weapons to beat those defenses. They had fought in jungles and deserts and frozen wastelands. They had killed each other in numbers that would horrify any other species in the galaxy. The Cathari were dangerous. But compared to humanity's own history, they were beginners. But the strangest thing about the human advance was not its speed or its power. It was the mercy. Human forces accepted surrenders. They took prisoners instead of executing them. They provided medical care to wounded enemies. When they captured cities, they went out of their way to protect civilians. Sometimes this cost them soldiers. Sometimes it slowed their advance. They did it anyway. This confused the Cathari more than anything else. A captured Cathari officer sat in a human prison camp, being treated for wounds he had received in battle. A human medic, a young woman named Amy Chun, carefully bandaged his arm. Her cousin had died on New Montana. Why? The officer asked. Why do you not hate us? Why do you help me after what we did? Amy did not look at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. We do hate you. We hate what you did. We hate that you made us become this again. She finished the bandage and finally met his eyes. But hate does not mean we have to become monsters. It means we choose not to be. That is the difference between us. She walked away, leaving the officer alone with his confusion. The war continued for 2 more months. Every Cathari fleet that stood against the humans was destroyed. Every fortress that resisted was taken. But through it all, the humans kept their word. They did not bomb civilian populations. They did not execute prisoners. They did not torture anyone for information. They were absolutely ruthless against the Cathari military. And they were absolutely merciful to everyone else. This combination of fury and restraint was something the galaxy had never seen before. Other species watched the war unfold with a mixture of awe and terror. The humans they had known for 300 years, the gentle healers and kind diplomats, had transformed into something else entirely. But they had not become cruel. They had become something harder to understand than cruelty. They had become justice. Old Admiral Hayes watched the reports come in from his command ship. His hand shook slightly now. The stress of the war was taking its toll on his aged body. But his mind was still sharp, and his will was still iron. How much longer? His aide asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3, Hayes replied. Then we reach their homeworld. Then we end this. And after? What happens to the Cathari people? Hayes was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars through his viewport. We rebuild them, he said finally. We teach them. We show them there is another way to live. It will take generations. It will be hard. But if we just destroy them, we become what they were. And we did not fight this war to become monsters. His aide nodded slowly. The galaxy will never forget this. No, Hayes agreed. They will not. And that is exactly the point. Every species out there is going to remember what happened when someone pushed humanity too far. They are going to tell stories about this war for thousands of years. He turned away from the viewport. Let us hope they learn the right lesson from those stories. High Commander Vexter made his last stand on the Cathari throne world. He had gathered every ship that remained, every soldier who could still fight, every weapon that still worked. The planet's defense grid was the most powerful in the known galaxy. He was certain it would hold. It fell in 4 days. On the 5th day, human ground forces entered the capital city. They moved through the streets in careful formations, securing buildings, arresting soldiers, and setting up medical tents for wounded civilians. Cathari citizens watched in amazement as the invaders who had destroyed their military now handed out food and water to their children. Vexter was found alone in his throne room. His guards had run away or surrendered. His advisors had scattered like frightened animals. The mighty warrior who had mocked human weakness stood by himself, holding his plasma blade, waiting for a glorious final battle. 3 humans entered the room. One was old Admiral Hayes, walking slowly but standing straight. One was Captain Nick Torres, whose sister had died on New Montana. And one was Margaret Cole, the former governor of New Montana, who had been rescued from a Cathari slave camp 2 weeks earlier. Margaret was thin now. Her hair had turned completely white. Her eyes held a deep sadness that would never fully go away. But she was alive, and she had asked to be here for this moment. "I, Commander Vexter," Hayes said formally. "You are under arrest for crimes against humanity. You will be tried before judges from across the Galactic Concord." Vexter stared at them in disbelief. "A trial? You will not execute me? You will not torture me for what I did?" "No. Why not?" His voice cracked with confusion. "After everything? I murdered your people. I laughed while they died. I would have enslaved your entire species if I could." Margaret Cole stepped forward. She had to look up to meet his eyes, but there was no fear in her face. Only a quiet, terrible calm. "Because that is the difference between us," she said. "You showed us your worst. You showed us everything horrible and cruel that you could be. And we chose not to become it." She paused. "You will spend the rest of your life in a prison cell. You will watch as we rebuild everything you destroyed. You will see your own people learn that there is another way to live. You will grow old knowing that your entire legacy was a failure. That is not mercy, High Commander. That is justice. And it is far worse than anything you imagined." Vexter dropped his blade. His clawed hands were shaking. For the first time in his life, he truly understood fear. Human soldiers took him away in chains. In the months that followed, the Cathari Dominion was officially dissolved. Its military was disbanded. Its leaders faced trials for their crimes. But the ordinary people, the citizens who had simply been born into a culture of conquest, were not punished. Instead, human ships arrived carrying food, medicine, and teachers taught the same species that has shattered the most powerful military in the galaxy now organized schools on conquered worlds. They built hospitals. They set up food distribution centers. They did exactly what they had always done, except now they were doing it for the people who had attacked them. The galaxy watched in astonishment. Ambassador Threlvok, who had once questioned human softness, now stood on the deck of a human relief ship orbiting a Cathari colony world. Beside him was Lisa Howard, now Admiral Howard, commanding the peacekeeping forces in the sector. "I understand now," Threlvok said quietly, "why you always warned everyone." Lisa nodded. She looked older than she had 2 years ago. The war had changed her, as it had changed all humans. But her eyes were still kind. "We knew what we were capable of," she said. "We had lived through it. Our history is filled with terrible wars, horrible weapons, suffering on scales that most species cannot imagine. We spent centuries trying to become better, kinder, more peaceful. And we did become those things, mostly. She looked out at the stars, but the capacity for violence never went away. It could not. It is part of what we are, written into our blood and bones. We carry our ancestors' fury inside us, sleeping, but never truly gone. So when you warned us not to make you angry, we meant it literally. We were not afraid that other species would hurt us. We were afraid of what we would do if someone pushed us hard enough to stop choosing peace. Threlvok's antennae trembled. And now? After all of this, will you go back to being the gentle giants we knew? Lisa watched the Kethari children playing in the streets below, supervised by human volunteers who were teaching them games from Earth. Some of those volunteers had lost family members on New Montana. They were playing with the children of the species that had murdered their loved ones. "We will try," she said. "Every single day, we will try. We will wake up and choose kindness. We will choose mercy. We will choose to build instead of destroy. And we will hope that we never have to show that other side of ourselves again." She paused. "But we will remember how. Just in case someone else forgets the lesson the Kethari learned. The war had lasted less than a year, but its effects would last forever. In the decades that followed, stories about the human war spread to every corner of the galaxy. Different species told the tale in different ways, but the core message was always the same. The humans were kind. They were generous. They would give you the clothes off their backs and the food from their tables. They would heal your sick and teach your children, and welcome you as friends without asking for anything in return. But they were also the species that had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times before they reached the stars. They carried inside them a capacity for destruction that terrified even their own historians. They had nuclear weapons and bioweapons and things even worse, all invented during wars against themselves. They had learned to control this darkness. They had chosen to be gentle, but the darkness was still there, sleeping beneath the surface, waiting to not wake it up. Every diplomat who dealt with humans learned this warning. Every military commander who considered challenging them heard these stories. Every child in the galaxy grew up knowing that there was one species you did not threaten, one species you did not provoke, one species whose kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. And when new species emerged and asked why everyone was so careful around the friendly, helpful humans, the older species would tell them the story. They would tell them about New Montana and the war that followed. They would tell them about fleets that burned and fortresses that fell, and a military empire that was dismantled in less than a year. They would tell them about human soldiers who destroyed their enemies completely and then stayed to rebuild what they had broken. And they would end with the same words every time. The humans warned everyone. They said it over and over again to anyone who would listen. They begged us to believe them. Do not make us mad. Now the universe understood why. And the universe would never forget.